Hello, everyone, and welcome to another MTE recap. This time we're doing the Shriners Children's Charleston Classic, which pretty much kicked off Feast Week. I'm your host, Sean Vowells, and as usual, I'm joined by Mike Koomar. Mike, this was the first one that we previewed, and while neither of us really predicted what was going to happen here, it was still a pretty interesting tournament with a very unlikely winner. So your overall thoughts on the Charleston Classic before we get into what we think of some of these teams?
Yeah, surprising finish, at least for me. My projected winner finished in last. My projected last place finished in first. So not a great look for me. I'll own it. But nevertheless, really surprising. I did feel a lot better about Seton Hall after watching a few games. They finished in third place, I believe. So they had a good finish to the tournament. So a lot comfortable about them. And then obviously Drake. Not a team we expected to do well at all, with a bunch of D2 transfers, like a completely new lineup, completely new head coach, and coaching staff. So really exciting stuff for this team out of the Missouri Valley. So excited for Drake.
Yeah, Mike, why don't we start with them? Ben McCollum is the coach. He comes over from Northwest Missouri State from Division II. After Tucker DeVries goes to West Virginia, he takes all of his players, and they were the better team in all three games. They completely diced up Miami. They got the better of FAU, and then they kind of just pulled away from Vanderbilt. None of this was fluky to me. They weren't making crazy shots. They were getting open looks, and they were staying in front. And I think had we power ranked these teams before, I think they would have been 7th or 8th. And at this point, Mike, they're looking like they come out of this tournament at 3-0, and they got a serious boost towards their at-large bid. But anything to add on the Bulldogs?
Yeah, I mean, there was no doubt in this tournament, really. It was really tight for bits and pieces of the Florida Atlantic game, but they dominated, never trailed against Miami, and then came out against Vanderbilt. And also, it was a little back and forth early, but they controlled this game coming down the stretch. So Drake never really worried in this tournament. It was never really that tight, Sean, which was, I think, incredible to see them take down teams, pretty easily. Florida Atlantic was probably the best game, I thought. Once we watched that game, that kind of seemed like the championship game de facto, if you will, going through the tournament, which is not something that we would have expected to see, but they're shooting the ball great, playing really good defense, allowing teams to under 70 points in all three games. So this looks great for Drake. You're getting 2 Power 5 wins here in games you weren't supposed to. We may see them in the top 25 pretty soon if they can rattle off a couple more wins in the out-of-conference, which it's pretty easy the rest of the way other than a game against Kansas State on the road.
And, that game's probably a lot easier than we once thought. And
Yep.
and that's actually a neutral game, Mike, in Kansas City. So
There you go.
not exactly a road game, but there will be more Wildcats fans there. But like I said, I think this is a repeatable formula, and they were pretty solid winners in all the games. Now, they did pull away from a couple teams late, but this guy Bennett Starts is really a player, 18.3 points per game, and he played his first 2 seasons of college ball in Division II. And, Mike, he did not leave the floor in this tournament. 120 minutes in 3 games in 4 days, 16, 17, 21 points, and just 4 fouls in the tournament. And he was my player of the tournament too. And I'm a little bit surprised to not see them in the top 25 this week. But if they keep winning ball games, they'll be there in no time because they're pretty legit.
Yeah, and to your point about, they're not chucking up shots, Drake shot 33% or worse in 2 out of these 3 games from 3-point range. They shot 21% from 3-point range against Miami and never trailed. And then 40% against FAU, 33% against Vanderbilt. So they weren't just, taking circus shots that were falling. This was a game that they are able to replicate and continue throughout the season. They've got to be the Missouri Valley favorites at this point, Sean. This looked really good for Drake.
Yeah, obviously very impressive to Drake. There's a couple other storylines we can get to here, Mike. I want to go to Vanderbilt. I think Mark Byington's team left feeling better about themselves than they did coming in. The offense certainly looks a little bit cleaner than I expected it to. They got some shooters on the outside that provide a lot of driving room, really, for especially A.J. Hogarth, Jason Edwards, and they ultimately end up having a really bad day at the office from 3 in the championship game, just 4 of 21. But Vanderbilt leaves with 2 wins. They already have the Cal win against an ACC team. They have Virginia Tech and TCU to go. But all things considered, you have to be pretty pleased with how this tournament went if you're a Doors fan.
Look, they won 2 out of 3, and that's huge. When you look at, they didn't really close very well against Nevada. I think that's a good lesson learned. I wouldn't be too concerned because that's just getting back to how do we close out a game, right? Make free throws, don't turn the ball over. Vanderbilt missed free throws and turned the ball over coming down the stretch, and that's what made that game so tight. But what an impressive win against Seton Hall. I said I felt a little bit better about Seton Hall. That's because they came out in the third-place game and played well. But this game was a blowout. It was only close for about the first quarter of the game before Vanderbilt just really opened up and took advantage. And they shot the ball pretty well in this game, 52% from the field. So able to get a lot of easy shots. And we all know Seton Hall is not a very good offensive team. So it's very good. And then still in Drake game, like Drake kind of took care of business coming down the stretch. I don't know if they Vanderbilt trailed by less than 8 points coming down the stretch. But I do agree. It seems like they're getting into a rhythm. What's nice about a lot of these games, Sean, these early season tournaments, is that you're allowed to get a rhythm into your team, especially if you're not used to playing a whole lot with a brand new team, which is critical to in the NIL area where we're basically doing 1-year contracts for all of our players. And certainly for Vanderbilt, this kind of seems like it was a good opportunity to get out in front of that and with a new team and a new coach.
And Mike, if you think about it, the first place team, Drake, entirely new team. Second place, Vanderbilt, entirely new team. Third place, Seton Hall, 1 returning starter and 1 other returning player. FAU in fourth place, new roster with a new coach. So, you're going to figure out a lot about your team in these tournaments, whether you win 3, lose 3, or anywhere in between. But I do think Seton Hall also, Mike, will be looking back at this tournament, and I feel like they refined their identity a little bit here. They are still good defensively. Vanderbilt made a ton of shots, credit to them to get to 76, but you hold VCU to just 66 in overtime, and then FAU to 61. But Seton Hall starting to tighten up the rotation a little bit. They're playing a lot of players, but they're starting to find some offense, primarily from the Old Dominion transfer Chauncey Jenkins. He's averaging up to 15 points a game. You always know that defense will be there for Shaheen Holloway, Mike, and when the shots start to fall, the effort on the defense is better, and at least coming away from Charleston, there's a formula to winning games for Seton Hall. Now, I don't think they'll make the tournament, but I do think Big East doormats will not happen after seeing some of the other teams in the conference and seeing them compete here. But thoughts on the Pirates?
Yeah, I think the Pirates just got to find that rotation of guys that's going to work, right? They played, I think, 12 guys this game. Yeah. And it wasn't like this game was a blowout. This was a 2-point win against Florida Atlantic. They played 12 players. The one of the players that played the least was one of their starters. So it's interesting. They got to find their footing, and they got to be able to make shots, right? There's no question that the effort is there on the defensive end. They're not allowing a whole lot of points with the exception of that Vanderbilt game. They've been locking teams down even when they've lost. So the formula is there, right? They just got to make a few more shots. And they probably have to tighten up that rotation, right? Figure out who is your winning 5, who are your winning, 6th, 7th, and 8th players that are going to give you the best chance to win. I would reckon that playing 12 players every single game is not the best formula for Seton Hall to win. It's not a good formula for anybody. This isn't hockey. You don't do crazy shifts like that in basketball. So I agree. I think this is a huge step for Seton Hall.
And it's not like, Mike, that they're complete full-on track meeting it and running up and down the floor,
no,
sort of like not. Auburn. You've seen Auburn do 12, Texas A&M do 12, but they're primarily better in half court. I saw some good I saw some really good half-court sets from Holloway going like, oh, I remember that play that St. Peter's ran in the tournament. And, I think, they have Scotty Middleton off the bench. He was a 5-star recruit who went to Ohio State. Like, there is enough talent here to at least be in the middle of the pack, I think. And I see a way that they can get to that 7th or 8th spot in the Big East. Now, they do have a couple tough games where they host Oklahoma State and they visit Rutgers on the road before conference play. So we'll see if they can get those before they suit up on the road at Villanova in Big East play on the 17th of December. Mike, that's less than a month away. So Seton Hall, it was a total nightmare of a start, but you are 3-3 after 6 games, or 4-3, sorry, with 2 pretty impressive wins here against VCU and FAU. And your defense is still ranked in the top 10, and your offense moved up 40 spots. So, obviously not the start that they wanted, but they're leaving Charleston better than they got there.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on the flip side, I think if you're Florida Atlantic, you're 4-4 now, and that's not a great record, especially considering the last 2 years how much success that they've had, but. I will offer some encouragement to Owl Nation out there with, once again, a brand new coach and a completely different lineup of players. None of those guys went to the Final Four a couple years ago, right? They played Drake really tight. It was a 5-point game with 4.5 minutes to go, right? They had a good chance to win coming down the stretch. They then got to Seton Hall and kind of laid an egg there coming down the stretch. But you look at an easier conference that they play in the American Conference. And then they've got a couple of winnable games coming up against Florida Gulf Coast, Florida International, until they play their last tough game of the out-of-conference against Michigan State. So I think they'll have a good chance to win that one. Michigan State doesn't know how to shoot a 3, as we're figuring out this year. But with that being said, I think Florida Atlantic is still looking like one of the better teams in the American. And if they can start, getting on a winning streak and getting hot, there's a chance that they could be an at-large team. They don't have any glaringly bad losses yet.
Looking at this, you got to give John Jacobs credit. This was a tough schedule.
Yeah.
I don't think 4-4 is all that bad considering the opponents you play. You play a Big 12 UCF team on the road. You play a good Charleston team on the road and lose a heartbreaker. You beat a good Liberty team on a neutral. You beat Oklahoma State. And you lose tough ones to Drake and Seton Hall. Like, I think this is a top 100 team in FAU, and you probably do need a really good conference season to be considered for an at-large. But, they've got talent. They really do. I mean, Leland Walker's a good scorer. You have Caleb Glenn, Kiki Tandy, Baba Miller, Nico Moretti. Like, you have enough players here where I do think that at the very least, Mike, you have to put them in second in the American here. Now, the team that I think might win the conference did something pretty special earlier today. You'll hear about that on another MTE recap. But again, 4-4, I think you're feeling a whole lot better than a 4-4 record would suggest.
Yeah, and they're a couple of tips away from being 6-2, maybe even 7-1. So, you got to close out games, and I understand that. But to start the season, I like Coach Jacobs' crew right now.
All right, Mike. Well, we can't talk about every team here because we do want to keep these videos to a certain time limit, but the last team that we do need to talk about is the team that is leaving 0-3. That's the Miami Hurricanes. They did come in undefeated, and they lose. Then they leave with 3 losses. They lose to Drake by 11, Oklahoma State by 6, and VCU by 7. Mike, I think panic is not even strong enough a word to describe what's happening down there in Miami. They are scoring it, but they cannot guard at all right now, as their analytical numbers say in the eye test. I mean, if you have like a good set, you're going to get a wide open shot. They've got things to change over there in Coral Gables.
Yeah, and what's concerning is, and the reason I have them as my favorite is they have players that have been around the block, right? Nigel Pack went to the Elite Eight. He was first team All Big 12 when it was the best conference in college basketball a few years ago. They have talent, right? So it's really concerning that they're not winning. And losing by 7 to VCU was very deceptive. This game was not even close until the very end, where Miami put up some garbage points to lose by 7. Miami was down by 16 with 6 minutes to go in this game. It wasn't even close. So really concerned, and I believe this very well may be Jim Larniega's last year in Coral Gables. There's been a lot of calls for him to be let go before. That was before they had a great NCAA tournament run a couple of years ago, but I think those calls are going to be as loud as they've ever been, and might cause him to resign at the end of this season.
Yeah, talent's not the problem. Like, they get 5-star recruit Jaleel Bethea. He's nowhere to be seen, just averaging 12 points a game, and it does not get any easier. You have Arkansas, then you start ACC play with Clemson, and then you go on the road to Rocky Top to Tennessee. So Miami's got to figure it out quick, or they're going to see more losses. So
yeah, I mean, they really got their butts kicked every single game. It was the same concept with Oklahoma State. It was a 6-point game, sure, but this game was dominated, and they got some garbage time points to make this close, and they never led against Drake. So yeah, this was really concerning for the Hurricanes.
And they're, we said somebody had to win. Somebody did have to leave 0-3 also, and coming in, I thought Miami was one of the best 2 teams, and they ultimately leave.
Talent-wise, they are.
Yeah. Oh, I don't think it's particularly close, but
yeah.
So a lot to look out for. A tough weekend, really, all around in the ACC, Mike, as you were mentioning before we clicked record. But a lot of you'll hear about those other teams in the other MTE recaps. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this Charleston Classic recap. Be sure to check out the other previews and recaps on the channel if you haven't already, and we'll see you next time.